U Economics. theueconomy.com. MMT and U. Within an MMT economic framework, everyone who wants paid work is provided with paid work, at a socially inclusive wage under a national job guarantee program. To a currency-issuing government that understands MMT, a national job guarantee program is an affordable, nationally funded, true, full employment program that provides jobs at the local community level, and doesn't rely on taxes to fund the program. Understanding MMT and how the fiat monetary system works could make a big difference in how you choose to live your life. Imagine a pair of glasses, and upon wearing them, you can see a matrix of the economy. As time passes, these glasses can become foggy and scratched and you cannot see through them as clearly as you once could, and so, you could miss seeing things like income and wealth inequality, or you could miss seeing the changes occurring to the climate, or you could miss seeing the plight of the unemployed and underemployed, seeing them only as just a percentage of the labor force and not as human beings. So one day you decide to put on a new pair, and now you can see clearly again, seeing all that you could not see before, and more importantly, seeing what an MMT framework could do for you, your community and your country. Provided you choose to work, a national job guarantee at a socially inclusive wage would provide you with financial stability, by providing you with guaranteed income protection, and the financial security you need to ensure your continued participation in social activities. Here's one of the founders of MMT, and the founder of what has become known as a National Job Guarantee, Professor Bill Mitchell. Video. Professor Bill Mitchell, University of Newcastle, explaining the idea of a national job guarantee at a socially inclusive wage. Understanding economics and the fiat-based monetary system can be complicated, but MMT, however, is aiming to provide you with the less complicated version. The MMT body of work is over 25 years of evidence-based economic research and development, created by 4 individuals working in different economic fields, and in different parts of the world, who independently came to the same conclusions about today's monetary system and how it operates. Many citizens today still believe that money is backed by gold, and is issued or created by central banks, or banks generally. This is not the case. Video. Committee on Financial Services, U.S. House of Representatives, February 11, 2004. Today, no country in the world backs its currency with gold anymore. The U.S. officially ended the gold standard in 1933, as the country needed to do more with its currency to help combat the massive unemployment and spiraling deflation of the Great Depression in the early 1930s. Most economists now agree, 90% of the reason why the U.S. recovered from the Great Depression was the break with gold, said Liaquat Ahmed, author of the book Lords of Finance. The U.S. completely cut all international ties to gold in 1971, and it will not return to gold as a form of currency, according to the results of a 2012 poll of the top 40 economists at the University of Chicago, in which not one supported a return to gold. In terms of where money comes from, MMT tells us that it's central governments that issue the currency, not central banks, and this type of money is referred to as government money. Central banks typically act as agents for the central governments that they serve. Money can also come from private or public banks. Banks, however, do not issue currency, they can only issue credit, which is also referred to as money. Private and public banks also operate as authorized agents of the central government. To keep it simple, let's just call all the different forms of money dollars. What all this means for you is when the government spends its dollars into the economy, the dollars you end up receiving along the way are adding to your overall assets, and when those assets are not enough to cover your living and social expenses, the only other legal options available to you are to either draw down from your savings, resulting in you having less assets, or borrowing dollars if you have no savings, and borrowing dollars creates a liability for you and an asset for the bank. When a currency-issuing government invests or spends its dollars, it is creating assets for its citizens, and when a bank provides credit, it is creating a liability for citizens. Both have a place, but when banks begin doing more of what a currency-issuing government can and should be doing, it occasionally ends in economic disaster for citizens. So how does a currency-issuing government create dollars? Today's monetary system. Video. Introduction and overview of the reality of modern fiat money, why the millennial generation can afford to build a better world, an updated and expanded version of the best-selling diagrams dollars. The story of MMT begins in the early 90s, when economist Warren Mosler, Professor Bill Mitchell, Dr. Stephanie Kelton, and Professor L. Randall Ray started researching, developing, and presenting to the world their understanding of macroeconomics, and in particular how today's monetary system really works, and the vast policy and currency powers of a currency-issuing government operating within that system. They dared to challenge the economics being taught in colleges and universities, and spoken about by non-MMT economists, presenting conclusions that help to explain the boom and bust cycles of our time, from the global financial crisis or GFC, as predicted by the founders of MMT, to past crises such as Zimbabwe, or the Weimar Republic, and how Japan continues to financially function, much to the dismay and disbelief of non-MMT economists. Conclusions that offer you a better understanding of the monetary system, and what a monetarily sovereign currency-issuing government operating within such a system can do for its citizens. Conclusions that are also offering non-monetarily sovereign nations, such as those in the European Union or EU, that surrendered their currency, and therefore are not currency-issuing governments, an opportunity to restructure their economies within an MMT framework. It is therefore understandable why so many academics and professionals across the globe are continuing to follow in the footsteps of the MMT founders, and why MMT itself is gaining worldwide popularity. MMT has something to offer all nations and their citizens, so that every human being has a chance to live their life better, a chance to live within a monetary system which has proven to be beneficial for citizens in the past, and one that is always available to be used, provided it is always used for the public good, and within an MMT framework that understands the monetary system, and the vast policy and currency powers of a currency-issuing government operating within that system. Having even a basic level of understanding, MMT can provide you with sufficient knowledge to begin questioning the news about the economy, and the economic commentary from our elected representatives, and if you happen to live in Australia, this website offers you an opportunity to have your say on how you want the economics that affects your life to work for you, your family, and the society in which you live. Intuition can provide us with a unique source of knowledge that could start with a thought or a feeling that, if explored beyond the boundaries of one's comfort zone, or their past education, can produce something new or even something extraordinary. If you have ever had a thought or a feeling that something isn't quite right about what you're being told about the economy, follow your intuition, and see where it takes you. MMT is over 25 years of evidence-based economic research and development that can confidently start by asking you, what do you value? What do you want? What other economic theory out there today starts with you and your values and aspirations in mind? Having covered the backbone of MMT, that is a national job guarantee, what else needs doing? Would you like to see greater income and wealth equality, or better public services, especially for the elderly, or more income for pensioners, more schools, hospitals, police and emergency services, more public transport, more parks and public playgrounds, more walking and cycling paths, greater investment in defense and border protection, or in training, research and development, or in infrastructure? And in terms of values, how much do you value the natural resources, the planet, having a democracy, animal rights, freedom of speech and religion, communities, the political process, the rights of indigenous citizens? Is it some of them, or all of them? Are all of them and more even possible? Well, they can be, not right now but eventually. This isn't about having everything now anyway, although a national job guarantee could be implemented now, so to speak. This isn't just about money, and the endless nature of it. It also isn't about always having the best in the world, or always being the best in the world, although such outcomes are possible, eventually. It's about how a currency-issuing government uses and distributes money through their public policies. It's about making life better for all citizens, their communities, and nations as a whole. It's about how visionary plans, such as a Green New Deal or a just transition, can be implemented, one step at a time, to keep economic growth in step with the productive capacity of the economy, and to not go beyond the limits of what economies and the planet can absorb or handle. It's about investing in research and education, to ensure that the goods and services that are needed to sustain life are there when needed. It's about what a currency-issuing government can do within an MMT framework to achieve the values and aspirations of their citizens, and to better protect and serve its citizens, particularly from an economic standpoint. Unfortunately, nations belonging to the European Union, or EU, like Germany, France, Italy, Greece and others, that surrendered their sovereign currency and replaced it with a foreign currency, are not monetarily sovereign nations, and they are therefore not completely able to operate within an MMT framework, given the self-imposed financial and political constraints that the EU nations placed upon themselves. However, some of the EU countries that are currently facing economic hardships are working with MMT economists to find a more humane way forward for their citizens and their nation. Interestingly, the UK, whilst it also joined the EU, it did not surrender its sovereign currency, and therefore remains a monetarily sovereign nation and a currency-issuing government that has chosen to adopt the financial constraints of the EU, thereby making the economic hardships faced by millions of UK citizens a political choice, not an economic one. MMT is non-political. Politicians from opposing parties could have the same understanding of MMT, but each of them may have a very different set of values and priorities. Therefore, MMT is policy agnostic when it comes to political parties and their policies, because MMT has no policies. For MMT to have policies, it must have a set of values, which it does not have. Having an understanding of MMT can provide citizens of monetarily sovereign nations an opportunity to voice their values and priorities to their elected representatives, and have anything that they, as a society, truly value and want, eventually. This website contains many videos and images, and should your video or image be featured here, and you as the owner would like it removed, please contact the website through Twitter or through the feedback form at the bottom of this page, and please accept our apologies in advance. This website is not affiliated with any political party, and it does not officially represent the modern monetary theory or MMT body of work. MMT is referred to as a theory, because when it comes to dealing with human beings, one cannot always be certain about the outcome. Economics is not an exact science. Much of today's economic policies are founded on economic theories, and MMT is no different, as the theory, so to speak, can be seen operating around the world today. The theory side of economics generally is becoming more prominent amongst the public, who may be encountering economics or MMT for the first time. It is reasonable to suggest, whoever knows and understands how a system works, stands to benefit most from that system. Understanding how the monetary system works is no different, and MMT understands it better than any other economic theory operating today. There's a big difference between a currency issuer and a currency user. Video. A nation's currency is a wonderful and powerful thing. Learn how countries like the US and Australia, which issued their own sovereign currency, can afford to use that currency to serve their citizens. Get inspired about our untapped potential, and learn to be less worried about so-called national debt and deficits. MMT tells us that a currency-issuing government is nothing like a household and should never act like one. Affordability alone is never an issue to a currency-issuing government that is the sole issuer of its currency. Video. Committee on the Budget, House of Representatives, March 2, 2005. It just depends on who's in government, and how much currency the government want to distribute and to whom, as seen in this U.S. distribution of income chart from 1949 through to 2015. U.S. figures. The earlier years show a greater distribution to the bottom 90%, whereas the later years shows a greater distribution to the top 10%. Today's fiat monetary system has created the greatest amount of wealth in the history of humanity. But who owns all this wealth? How concentrated is it? And if it is concentrated as we may think, is it because some know more about the system than others? Do governments know and understand how it operates? Do government advisors know and understand it? And more importantly, if citizens knew more about it, could they benefit more from this understanding? Warren Mosler, economist and a founder of MMT, knows a thing or two about the monetary system, having spent over 30 years in banking and finance. Video. Warren Mosler discussing the relationship between the government budget deficit and the private sector savings. Theory equal. Net financial assets in the non-government sector only increase when the government deficit spends. Central bank operations like quantitative easing only shift assets from one form to another. MMT tells us in simple terms that currency-issuing governments spend mostly by increasing numbers in bank accounts, and by decreasing numbers in bank accounts when tax is paid, and so-called government borrowing involves moving numbers around in different bank accounts. MMT therefore tells us that a currency-issuing government spends dollars into existence first, and taxes dollars out of existence second. It therefore does not rely on taxes to fund its spending, and it can never run out of the dollars it alone issues. MMT tells us that all types of spending beyond what an economy can absorb, be it government or non-government spending, carries with it inflationary pressures. MMT also tells us that any leftover government spending that has not yet been taxed could be regarded as leftover tax credits, and due to our obligation to pay taxes, which can only be paid with the government's currency, this is what gives the currency value and drives the demand for the government's currency, for which it controls the supply. Now these tax credits that you hold and own, you only own them until you use them to pay tax. Just like store credits on a retail store gift card, the store always issues the value of the gift card first, and you pay for the card using your tax credit second. After paying your tax, any leftover tax credits keep circulating throughout the economy. They can be exchanged with other storekeepers, phone companies and so on, who also need them to pay their taxes. These transactions are recorded along the way, until the tax credits are used to pay taxes, at which time the tax credits are destroyed, by ending up as just numbers on a spreadsheet for accounting purposes, just like store credits after they've been used. In other words, just numbers, in accounts, and on spreadsheets. Numbers that, if not explained properly to citizens, can cause unnecessary fear, with such terms as a ballooning national debt number, or blowouts in the budget deficit number, or stealing money from our children to pay for the government debt, or maxing out the government credit card, burdening future generations and so on, but not anymore. To a currency-issuing government of a monetarily sovereign nation that is the sole issuer of the currency, the monetary system is made up of nothing more than numbers, and you can never run out of numbers, just like the scorekeeper of a sports game can never run out of numbers when keeping score, and central banks are usually the scorekeepers for governments. Numbers, in and of themselves, are not something to fear. To have an endless amount of numbers, in this type of monetary system, and to fear the size of a number, just wouldn't make sense, because the endless nature of numbers is the monetary system. It's understandable why some may have a fear of inflation, but only if numbers are seen in isolation, that is viewing the number without an MMT lens, therefore restricting your vision to only seeing the currency powers of a currency-issuing government and nothing else. Viewing the number through an MMT lens allows you to see both the currency powers and the vast policy options available to a currency-issuing government that allow it to formulate and target their policies, in order to manage the demand and supply pressures on the real resources, and the productive capacity of the economy, to keep a lid on inflation. Dr. Stephanie Kelton is also one of the founders of MMT, and provides some further insights into MMT in this video. The MMT description starts at around 4:15 into the video. Video. Modern monetary theory. MMT is gaining traction in American politics, energizing the progressive left, and annoying deficit hawks. Stephanie Kelton explains the basics. And here's another MMT founder, Professor L. Randall Wray, with a few short, and to the point videos on so-called government debt, and what MMT is not saying. Video. Professor L. Randall Wray on why a government with a sovereign non-convertible currency might choose to issue bonds. Bond sales are not a borrowing operation for the state. Professor L. Randall Wray discussing how bond sales work with a currency-issuing government with a floating exchange rate. Because the government can issue currency and indeed must every time it spends, there is no need to issue debt in order to spend. Professor L. Randall Wray on a few things that modern money theory is not saying, but people seem to hear anyway. They include, the government can buy anything for sale, but that does not mean it should. MMT is not inherently inflationary, but there could be an impact on exchange rates, and overspending beyond capacity limits by the government can lead to inflation. The monetary system and unemployment. How does a government provision itself, and did the introduction of the monetary system create the first unemployed person? Also, does turning worthless pieces of paper that is litter into something of value create employment? Video. Warren Muslim Modern Money versus Austrian School. The difference between money and litter is the tax man. Warren Muslim Modern Monetary Theory versus the Austrian School. Debate. Unedited version of the debate. www.modernmoneynetwork.org. Okay, so that's a yes and yes to the employment questions according to MMT. But what about the non-MMT approach of narrow, the non-accelerated inflation rate of unemployment, the one that tells us there's a natural rate of unemployment before we risk inflation, or how, according to narrow, we can have full employment when at the same time millions remain unemployed? Have we as a society really accepted keeping citizens unemployed over the last 40+ years, for nothing other than a fear of inflation? Video. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez questions Fed Chair Jerome Powell about the U.S. unemployment rate and the inflation rate. When there is spare capacity, that is the presence of unemployment in the economy, as there typically is in modern monetary economies around the world, inflation is not a major concern. Therefore, the level of unemployment is a political choice, not an economic one. MMT therefore tells us that a currency-issuing government picks the level of unemployment. And so how does MMT propose to solve this issue? A currency-issuing government achieves greater economic and social benefits as well as greater price stability when it maintains a buffer pool of employed citizens rather than a buffer pool of unemployed citizens. Maintaining a buffer pool of employed citizens takes shape in the form of a national job guarantee, and it is a core component of MMT. It is unreasonable to expect the private sector to employ every person seeking full-time paid work with full-time paid work, even in boom times, when the private sector regards the use of labor as a cost. This is not the case for a currency-issuing government that can afford to end all involuntary unemployment and underemployment by providing paid work to citizens that can't find paid work within the private sector, and in so doing, restore some dignity back into the lives of millions of citizens through a national job guarantee. A national job guarantee does not rely on taxpayers, rich or otherwise, to fund the program. It also acts as an automatic stabilizer for the economy, allowing citizens to transition between the government and private sector by entering the program in economic downturns, and re-entering the private sector in economic upturns. It is life-changing and life-sustaining as it provides the type of economic stability and social benefits that allows a currency-issuing government to set up a system that ensures the ongoing availability of goods and services that are needed by a society to function are available when needed. And one way a currency-issuing government can achieve this objective is through greater government spending on a range of public policies that create jobs well into the future, in areas such as research and education as well as environmental projects. A national job guarantee at a socially inclusive wage or income level is nothing like a universal basic income or UBI, and you can find out why by visiting the media section of the website. Here are some other examples of what a currency-issuing government can do. In addition to your values and aspirations, a currency-issuing government has the policy and currency powers to also have what it wants and values, eventually. So if a currency-issuing government wants the top 20% of households to own on average 80 times more than all other households, as is the case currently in Australia, then you could say it has achieved what it set out to achieve, by virtue of having achieved it. If however it now considers 80 times more as excessive and around 20 times as more desirable, it can achieve that too, eventually. It possesses the policy and currency powers needed to achieve such an outcome. Further still, if 80 times more is not considered enough, and it wants a number closer to 160 times more, it can achieve that too, eventually. If on the other hand, a currency-issuing government wants 0 involuntary unemployment, 0 cost to its citizens for education and health care, environmental protections, and so on, and it does so whilst at the same time wanting the top 20% of its households to own 320 times more on average than all other households, it again has the policy and currency powers to achieve it, eventually. The road to true economic prosperity for citizens of monetarily sovereign nations begins with a currency-issuing government ending all involuntary unemployment and underemployment through a national job guarantee, whilst simultaneously protecting the planet, because what a currency-issuing government cannot do is fix the planet when it breaks. Further details about the National Job Guarantee and a Green New Deal can be found in the media section of the website. When currency-issuing government abandons the economic theories and practices that clearly fail their citizens time and time again, with boom and bust cycles, and begins using their currency and policy powers to deliver economic and social justice for all its citizens, in a non-inflationary and ecologically sustainable way, then MMT has the economic framework to maintain a balanced economy. It's a political choice, because affordability alone is no longer an issue. Some MMT takeaways. A currency-issuing government is nothing like a household and should never act like one. A currency-issuing government must firstly issue the currency by spending it into existence, before it can demand it back in taxes, which therefore means it does not rely on taxes to fund its spending. A currency-issuing government faces 0 financial constraints, which means it can never go broke, and it can pay the interest on any amount of debt that is denominated in the currency that it alone issues. It can also afford to buy anything that is for sale in its own currency, including all idle labor. It does, however, face other constraints, in terms of real resources and the productive capacity of the economy. If an economy is at full capacity, a currency-issuing government faces a real resource constraint, but not a financial constraint. When there is idle capacity in the economy, a currency-issuing government faces no real resource or financial constraints. Government deficits, whilst they matter, they don't matter in the way we may think they do. A currency-issuing government that issues its own currency can never run out of the currency it alone issues. And a monetarily sovereign currency-issuing government can also become a good global citizen, or GGC, by using its vast powers for the good of humanity. MMT offers a currency-issuing government with its vast policy and currency powers, a way to organize itself, within an MMT framework that supports the values and priorities of the society it is meant to protect and serve. More and more people worldwide are putting on a new pair of glasses, and seeing how the fiat monetary system operates through an MMT lens. Citizens of monetarily sovereign nations around the world today are calling upon their elected representatives to also put on a new pair of glasses, to see their economies through an MMT lens, and to use their powers to improve the lives of all of its citizens as well as their political processes. If you live in Australia, and you would like to let Australia's elected representatives know about MMT, and in particular a national job guarantee, click Have Your Say at the top of this page, and thanks. This site also wishes to pay tribute to the many academics and professionals across the globe that continue to promote the MMT body of work, as well as the many podcasters and Facebook discussion groups that have assisted in establishing this website. Do we really need to experience another Great Depression, or global financial crisis, or another World War to again prove How public policies and currency powers are always available to a currency-issuing government, to serve and protect its citizens. To quote Warren Mosler, "There is no financial crisis so deep that a sufficiently large fiscal adjustment cannot deal with." Now isn't that a comforting fact? Powered by Squarespace and MMT.